the age of 19 in 1962, she was a...
See, but I have the files. You know, I read the stuff at the National Archives, and I read these other things. I said to myself, that guy, how can that be possible? You know, pistols and the fondle slap of choice, I don't know, computers doesn't really matter. Internet, professional wrestlers, and not just Ventura style. It doesn't matter where the cartoon comes from as long as it's real. It doesn't take hard to get real information. Because seriously, they don't want you to have to breeze two sources whenever I try to prove out. You know, it's not. You expect your government to tell you the truth, you're going to sadly disappoint another one of these things.
Dear Lord, what a dirty, dirty old man, huh?
Really? Can't be serious. Is this really want things to be? Come on. More hooker, eruptions? Eruptions, whatever.
Like Dave Powers kind of...
Really?
Allegedly broadcast live from Pima Region 2, within the borders of the formerly united and currently occupied states of America. We bring you the Ochelli Effect.
I damn sure know I'm an original.
We have all these situations. I'd love to know why it takes 50 years for
that's that.
For a 19-year-old girl to eventually get up to gumption to put these things out.
Knows what it's like. Feel these feelings like I do. And I blame you. No one bites back as hard on their anger. When my pain and woe will show through. So, it is Tuesday night on UCY.TV radio. This is the Ochelli Effect. I am Chuck Ochelli. Kind of stuck in a strange space tonight. But Tuesday night, as we all know on my show, is the Tuesday night with the Liberty Beacon. That is the Liberty Beacon, all one word.com. You can find plenty of interesting stuff at that website. Also, the Falling Darkness, all one word again, .com. And as per usual, I'll be having Roger Landry on in just a moment. But of course, you know, takes me a minute to figure things out, blah, blah, blah. And, gee, it looks like things might be working for me tonight. It looks like the Skype is working. It looks like the stream is working. It looks like everything is actually working. So, the founder, the main guy who rants and talks and does a whole lot of stuff. You can't even imagine how much stuff this guy does with the Liberty Beacon, actually. But once again, I am very, very proud to present Mr. Roger Landry. How are you tonight, Roger?
Geez, I just hope I can live up to you and everything you say about me. How are you, Chuck?
It's an interesting life, sir. It's been one of those days. You remember you and I had a discussion off the air a couple of days ago, and you said you were in a dark mood?
Yeah.
Welcome to my dark mood. Anyway. So, I do have an article which I will drop in chat in a minute. Let's see if I can get through this without actually breaking my own policy of turning around and cursing and everything else, because I'm just in that kind of mood today. Believe it. Anyway, Roger, I'm sorry. I don't mean to bring the mood down when you're about to talk, and I know what we're going to talk about tonight. And it's a very important issue. Of course, we're not going to discuss foreign policy or any of the wonderful is stuff that's out there and all that, right? It's not time for any of that, because we really do need to focus on some of these more domestically focused issues, some of these things that are health and human interest type stories. And there is nothing more important, actually, than vaccines. When it comes to the health of our up-and-coming generation and ourselves as adults. So, like I said, let's see if I can successfully actually drop that link into the chat room. And looks like there it goes. Oh, maybe not. Oh, that's okay. I will get it from the site anyhow, because it's somehow, you know what, I copied it and it didn't go right, but we're going to put it in the chat room. You guys hear this on delay anyway, so there she goes. Now I've actually got it.
Great.
Anyway, Roger, sorry.
You don't have to apologize. We all go through that, especially with what we do. I mean, you can't be talking about negatives all the time and not have it affect your mood or affect the things that you're doing, even affect your personal life at times. So it's totally understandable, Chuck. Believe me, I have a lot of days where I get totally exacerbated.
You know, and this is why, I mentioned on this show more than once that, a monumental change occurred in my personal life due to the fact that I really started to speak about this stuff publicly, that I started to show people what it was that I was thinking for many a year. And it does change your personal life. I mean, you notice that your circles of friends change, your family starts to look at you differently. You may be disowned by some people that were once close to you. I mean, it's just the way it is. Because, reality is just a hard thing for some people to swallow. At the same time, they have no problem with the fluoride and the GMOs. They'll swallow that all day and they don't realize it's killing them. But, reality, on the other hand, is just, too tough of a pill, a little too jagged, I would say, for some. So, sorry again to go off onto another sort of sub-rant, but I did drop that article, and of course we were looking at it. It was published by the Liberty Beacon staff, says here, and the title of the article I'd like to tell everybody is Autism and Vaccines, Utter Catastrophe in America. So, you're catching it downstream later. Just remember, go to thelibertybeacon.com, and you can find that, I'm sure, just by searching autism, along with a plethora of other articles related to the autism topic. So, anytime you're ready, sir, I am ready to go.
All right. Well, what I need to apologize up front for is if you're already in a bad mood or in a dark place, this isn't exactly going to brighten your day up a whole hell of a lot. And as you alluded to the title, Autism and Vaccines, Utter Catastrophe in America. That's the title. The subtitle, as soon as you open the article, is Autism and Vaccines, Utter Catastrophe in America, and a government that just doesn't give a damn. And I'm going to qualify that statement. And actually, the author of this article is myself. And let me go through this so that we can get to a point of discussion. Okay? The title is blatant, as it should be. Autism should be the most important topic on the mind and lips of every doctor and government servant, health-related departments, and elected representatives in this country today, just due to its sheer magnitude and scope of the crisis unfolding right before our eyes. Since it is not, one has to believe the mechanisms of corruption, cronyism, and greed, or something much more sinister, are at play. The following, what I'm about to present to you, is basically a synopsis of many vaccine to autism-related articles in the Liberty Beacon, articles that we have written and published. Alone are many. Also included is a library, which is attached at the bottom of the article, of over 50 links to related or pertinent articles. We present this article and the attached link library as a tool to educate. So let's get into the topic. We are constantly being told by the CDC that vaccines cannot, have not, and never will cause autism, and that thimerosal, the accused catalyst, has been removed from our vaccines. Most dutiful citizens tend to accept this as fact. After all, isn't the motto of the CDC protecting lives, protecting people 24/7? So how could we not fall in lockstep with an entity so bent on our safety and protection, except they are blatantly lying and have had the facts or have known just the opposite for about a generation. And I would suspect it's actually much longer. A generation in which we have witnessed a catastrophic rise in what can now only be described as the blight of autism. And let me qualify that before I go on. I'm not telling you that anybody who has autism is a blight. I'm telling you that the mechanism of autism and its increase of magnitudes over the last generation is a blight, not the individuals. We can place no blame on the individuals who have been afflicted with this through no fault of their own. When a department of the government charged with the protection of the citizens of this country jumps through painstaking hoops to hide the truth about the mechanism that has led to the catastrophic rise of autism in this country and intentionally and blatantly misrepresents this information, well, let your imagination run wild and you will probably not be hitting on the level of evil and tyranny this truly represents. At what point do we, the people, decide that the millions who suffer today from this affliction, the millions more who must dedicate their personal time and their lives to caring for those afflicted, and the untold personal wealth dedicated to the care of those afflicted by this malady that could so easily have been avoided, is grounds for serious retribution against this inept, corrupt, or just plain sinister organization. When we're all broke, when we're all sick, when we're all dead, you must also be aware that by default, many more in government organizations outside the CDC must also be complicit in this cover-up. That can only be described as the greatest crime ever committed against the American public. Please let me clarify something up front. We do not claim this. What follows is the only causality for autism. What we do feel is a blatant and significant one. This is a blatant and significant point of causality. And also to say we have no champions in our leaders, and we never get the complete truth on any of this. Okay? I get so frustrated when I even talk about this, okay? They don't seem to take their responsibility seriously to look out for and protect those they represent. The problem is
Well, you know
what we're seeing here is an interaction that is too far and in between anything from our government unless it's from whistleblowers. What is presented next is proof that this, in fact, does exist. Okay? There's a link I put here called Autism One and Generation Rescue 2013 Congressional Panel. This was actually discussed by a congressional panel, one of the few times I actually saw it happen. Please take some time, anybody who opens this link, to watch that video. The Autism One and Generation Rescue 2013 Conference Congressional Panel featuring Congressman Burton, Congressman Weldon, who is also an MD, and Congressman Bill Posey. They actually discussed this, one of the few times you will ever see this discussed via a government or congressional panel. When I have discussed this with those who are far from stupid but still pro-vaccine, or who totally reliant on their absolute trust in their doctors and the healthcare professionals, I see a very disturbing trend. I find a vast majority of those I ask about vaccines with two big misconceptions. The first one being that thimerosal has been removed, and thimerosal is actually, for anybody who doesn't know, mercury, one of the most damaging substances to human physiology naturally occurring on this planet. But they have the misconception that thimerosal has been removed from our vaccines. It is still used in many batch doses of vaccines given to our children, including the yearly flu shot. And the second thing I find is that they are aware of thimerosal, and they firmly believe that ethyl mercury, which is about 50% of the volume of thimerosal, is metabolized harmlessly by the body. That's poppycock. These misconceptions are either ignored or, in a lot of cases, perpetrated and perpetuated by healthcare professionals today, encouraging many to wrongly believe that the scourge of thimerosal is either a tinfoil hat myth or does not exist anymore, or it never did exist. Now let's ask the question, does thimerosal cause or trigger autism? Thimerosal is broken down by the body in the following fashion. The ethyl mercury, which is what is contained within thimerosal, ethyl mercury, is first metabolized by the body into toxic methyl mercury, which is then remetabolized into organic mercury. Yes, I said mercury, the most deadly and toxic naturally occurring substance known to exist on this planet to human physiology and second only to ionizing radiation. Okay? The next thing I give is a link to a comprehensive review that explains the metabolization of thimerosal in the human body, the steps I just went over. But this is done in an actual peer-reviewed study. So if you get a chance, take a look at that. So let's break this down just a little bit further and get blatant. The EPA has set standards for the maximum exposure to mercury any individual should receive on any given day. Anything exceeding this exposure is considered toxic. I have a chart in this article, okay, that basically lays out what the EPA states. Anything exceeding this given level is considered a toxic level, okay? I'm going to go over a few of these, and if you get a chance, study the chart yourself, all right? And we're going to use as a point of reference the yearly flu shot, which contains 25 micrograms of mercury in batch doses, which is given to a vast majority of those receiving the flu shot in this country today. Now, I'm going to give you EPA standards, and I'm going to give you actual dosage received. All right? If you are an adult, you receive 7 micrograms of mercury. That is the maximum allowable for a full-grown adult by EPA standards. In a 25 microgram mercury flu shot, that is 3.5 times the mercury in that flu shot that the EPA sets as a toxic level. So you're getting 3.5 times what the EPA states is a toxic level in that flu shot. Let's go up a little bit. Let's go down to, say, a 12-month-old child. And this is all, of course, figured out via average body weight. The mercury flu shot, containing flu shot, that is given to a 12-month-old of average weight is 12.5 micrograms. That is 11.9, or basically 12 times what the EPA states is a toxic level of mercury. Again, the most toxic naturally occurring substance on this planet to human physiology. But here's where the real tyranny comes in, okay? And if you take a look at this chart, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. No exaggeration here. I don't believe in exaggeration. I just say things with angst and with volume. The average or the maximum allowable mercury exposure for the average-sized fetus is 0.01 micrograms of mercury. But let's stop for a second and consider something. A fetus is contained within the mother's body. The mother doesn't get an itty-bitty little flu shot because she is carrying a It's a full microgram flu shot, 25 micrograms of mercury. Now, I just got done telling you that the EPA sets a standard of 0.01 micrograms. Do the math. That fetus shares the mother's bloodstream. The blood that circulates through that mother's veins also circulates through that fetus's body. That fetus has no blood-brain barrier to protect it against poisonous metals. That fetus is receiving 2,500 times what the EPA considers a toxic level of the most deadly substance to human physiology naturally occurring on this planet. 2,500. Yes, you heard me right. The fetus, with no discernible blood-brain barrier to protect it, receives via its mother's bloodstream 2,500 times the maximum exposure allowed by the EPA of the most toxic, naturally occurring substance on this planet. And tens of thousands of times what the EPA sets as a limit in our drinking water. Now, I need to tell you that the effect of mercury on the brain is that it slaughters brain cells. You can go on YouTube and find a video where they actually show you where a tiny amount of mercury or thimerosal is dropped onto a petri dish of live brain synapses. You can watch in real time as these synapses wither and die right before your eyes. Now, I've just told you this unborn child receives, depending on its body weight, but we're using an average fetus size, not a just gestated fetus size, or not a ready-to-be birthed baby. An average size fetus receives 2,500 times this absolutely toxic substance with no blood-brain barrier to protect it, so it immediately starts to slaughter brain cells. Well, a lot of people will tell you that one of the biggest drawbacks or one of the biggest causalities of mercury at this point in any fetus development is the result is cognitive disorder. You have slaughtered a lot of brain cells before this child is ever even born. So do vaccines cause autism? Autism is basically a cognitive disorder. Well, let's run a little comparison test. Let's not just go by the chart. Let's go by what you see in the real world. Let's talk about the symptoms you physically see in an autistic child. What are the symptoms of autism in children? Loss of speech, social withdrawal, reduced eye contact, repetitive behavior, hand flapping, toe walking, temper tantrums, sleep disorders, seizures. Okay, now let's compare this to something else. What are the symptoms of mercury poisoning in children? The physical observed symptoms: loss of speech, social withdrawal, reduced eye contact, repetitive behavior, hand flapping, toe walking, temper tantrums, sleep disorders, seizures. Gee, where does coincidence leave off and it's a fact jump in? Now, you don't have to believe me. You can Google this and do this comparison yourself. I beg you to please check this for yourself. So what I've just shown you is that the observed symptoms of mercury poisoning in children is identical to the observed symptoms of autism in children. Please check this out for yourself. This is either a case of massive coincidence or one of the most heinous crimes against humanity is being perpetrated on a colossal scale. It is or is it also a coincidence that the rise in autism almost perfectly matches the rise in the number and scope of vaccinations we are inundated with? The EPA even states that one of the hazards of mercury exposure is brain damage. It's on their site. One of the hazards of mercury exposure is brain damage. So, what do you think autism is? Basically, it's brain damage. And again, I'm not telling you that thimerosal is the only cause of autism. There are many environmental and biotoxins in our lives today, and I've done some great shows with Dr. David Lewis, who was an EPA environmental scientist who studied and reported on environmental toxins for 30 years. So I'm not telling you that the only catalyst for autism is thimerosal. What I am telling you is that by the EPA's own admission, the mercury or the thimerosal within our vaccines, which we are inundated with, we are the most vaccinated society on this planet, one of the side effects is brain damage. Thimerosal is a catalyst. There's no way it can't be. Okay? But again, let's go back to the CDC's motto, okay? Protecting our health and well-being 24/7. They've known about this for well over a generation. I will also tell you that since the ramp-up of vaccines in this country, we have seen a 6,000% increase in autism. You heard me right. And I'm being conservative. Okay? Yes, there are those who will push back against my choice of, stating a 6,000% increase. To those, I will say this. 6,000% is actually understated. So let's put it into perspective. In the late 1950s and the early 1960s, vaccinations, although utilized, were few and far in between, and the autism rate was almost non-existent, occurring at a rate of well over 1 in 20,000. Most doctors never having seen a single case in their entire practice and never even knowing or hearing the term autism. Yet a scant 3 generations later, 60 years, and this is since the initial and the massive ramp-up of vaccines, okay? Autism occurs at a rate today of 1 out of 28 male children. So let's do the math. 20,000, seriously lowballed, divided by 28 equals an increase of 714 times. So when I say 6,000%, I'm being very conservative. If you do the math, it's actually much higher than that. Today, our children are inundated with multiple vaccines, say about 15 vaccinations, depending on the child and where you live. And America has witnessed nothing less than a catastrophic explosion. I dare you to say that's exaggerated. In cognitive disorders. It's not just autism. It's ADHD. It's dementia. It's Alzheimer's. We suffer a higher level of cognitive disease in this country than any other nation on the planet. Yet has anybody seen this government push the panic button? 1 in 28 children born. And I'm going to tell you something. It has been estimated by the year 2020, it will drop to 1 in 10 children will be afflicted by autism. Do you see this government push the panic button? As they did with polio, measles, mumps, cancer? Do you see a massive government program and spending to get to the bottom of this blight? Why not? Could it be that they are already fully aware? Could it be that they know that vaccines are the catalyst? Could it be that they know that vaccines are causing the issue to a large extent? Well, we know this to be a fact because we're all very aware, anybody who does any research at all, of the CDC whistleblower who just came forward and said that 13 years ago, the CDC ran their own research and found that the MMR vaccine, when given to African American children under 36 months of age, increased their chances of becoming afflicted with autism by 340%. This is the CDC's own research. The link is established by our own government. Could it be that they're already fully aware of the catalyst behind the scourge? Where does coincidence leave off? And it's a fact. Jump in. At least 3 of the vaccinations that I'm aware of, there could be more, but through my research, your child will receive are laced with thimerosal. Please do the research. Up from a low of 1. They had reduced it all the way down to 1. Now it's back up to 3. Okay? Is this signifying the return of thimerosal to vaccines in a much larger fashion? Do you still believe the lie? Just how many lies will it take to wake the population of this country up to what can only be described as the most destructive lie ever told? Everything I stated in this commentary can be readily found in the links that I provided. And I provided you with over 50 links. And each article, those links will take you to as additional links for research. What you have in this article is an entire library connecting vaccines to the rise in autism in this country. If you took every link I gave you and every link in the articles they lead to, you have well over 100 articles, a lot of them peer-reviewed studies. Okay. That's where we stand right now, Chuck. As you can see, this makes me very, very angry. It does.
And rightfully so, because, you know, this is the case. This is what's happening. Now, a couple of things that I notice when I start to look up these kinds of things, and not just from your article, but from other sources as well, is that first of all, the justification for putting thimerosal, which is not, by the way, a
I'm
chemical.
So glad you brought this up. Go ahead.
Preservative all by itself, but they say that it is there to preserve the vaccine. Here's the funny part about this, folks. Scientifically speaking, it's not even an effective preservative. Okay, so the justification for adding this stuff in there is already out from under them. There is no scientist that will tell you that this is an effective preservative. Now, depending on how you measure it, it is between 49.55% and I think 56.3%, depending on how it's measured, mind you. What we're talking about here is this ethyl mercury. There is no justification. It's not an adjutant. It's not part of the cocktail. It's not part of what vaccines were originally designed to do. It's there as a preservative. and not even an effective one at that, Roger.
Well, I'll tell you, let's take that just a little bit further, okay?
Sure.
They had reduced by a very large margin the amount of vaccines that contain thimerosal. And then what they found out was that in order to use something else as a preservative, their profit margin on these vaccines was going to go way down. So what you would have is the vaccines would be much more expensive for places like the third world country, where poor countries really can't afford to spend a lot on vaccinations. So believe it or not, the AMA, the American Medical Association, which initially pushed in the early 2000s to have thimerosal removed from vaccines, is now one of the entities that is pushing for the return of thimerosal to vaccines to keep so that they can stay affordable for third world countries. So what's the trade-off? Okay? And why do we get vaccinated? We get vaccinated, supposedly, by their own admission, to save lives. Okay? I need to ask anybody out there a question. If you know that by the year 2020, which is less than 6 years away, 1 out of 10 children in this country are going to be afflicted with autism. If you know that you have a 1 in 10 chance, once you have your child vaccinated, of that child being afflicted for the rest of their life with a cognitive dysfunction called autism, do you think that you're going to allow your child to play, or you're going to play Russian roulette with your child's life at that point? So, yes, okay, we'll go along with their propaganda, all right? It is okay, by their standards, to sacrifice the lives of a few children to save the lives of a lot of children. Well, 1 in 10 is not just a few children. It's not, okay? 1 in 10 isn't. And what if it was their child who was afflicted by autism? What is an acceptable amount? And let me take this one step further, okay? And I said this on a show last night. I'd like to say it again now, all right? If you stop and think, everything that has been put out across history in this country, everything like PCBs and a lot of environmental toxins, so on and so forth. Long-term studies have been done on what is considered to be an environmental toxin or what is considered to be a biotoxin. Long-term studies are done to show the ramifications they have on the public and the efficacy of these poisons within the biosphere and within the human body. Can anybody out there explain to me why this country has been vaccinated for over a century now, to some degree, and no long-term study on vaccine efficacy has ever been conducted by this government? None. Zero. You can't find one. Explain that to me.
Well, you know where I'm going to go with this. I
hope you do.
The fact is that the only reason for not having studied this thus far, the only reason for not having presented the study, I should say, because it's very possible that the study has been done.
Oh, I'm sure it has. And someday a whistleblower might just bring it out to us.
I was just going to say, I guarantee you that in a couple of years, we're going to get some guy that's going to be painted with the crazy brush is going to come out and tell us that this study has already been done.
Like Dr. Thompson, who came out and said 13 years ago, the CDC, via their own research, their own scientists conducted the research, absolutely connected the dots between the MMR vaccine and autism. Absolutely. When you can tell me, and this is just one demographic, okay? We're only using one, but if it affects one demographic, it affects everybody. It just affects this specific demographic more than others. That African-American children vaccinated with the MMR vaccine prior to 36 months had a 340% increase in chances of developing autism. Now, if that's not a direct link, what is? And if it wasn't for Dr. Thompson coming forward and making that information available to us and stating he was part of the study and that his conscience was basically beating the crap out of him and he felt he had to come forward, how many children in the last 13 to 14 years have been afflicted with autism that didn't have to be?
Right.
Because they knew this. The CDC did this research and buried it.
See, this is part of the problem, but you know what the other part of the problem is, Roger, and I'm going to say this, and I know this is going to sound like I'm going out on a limb, but I don't think so. Here's the deal. If you think about 10 people that you know with children add up those children and figure out how many of them have some form of a cognitive problem, that have some form of autism, etc., learning disabilities, on and on and on. I think that we don't have to wait for 2020 to get to this level where we're looking at 1 in 10, because through my own personal observation and asking other people that very same question, just simply compile the amount of underage individuals that you know of through your friends, through your family, sit there and add them together and figure out what percentage of them are being affected by stuff like this already.
I'm going to take this one step further and say something that's really going to blow your mind. And all of this is contained in the 50-plus links below this article. There is such a virtual cornucopia of information for you people to go through and prove everything I've said. I never, ever exaggerate. But I'm going to tell you something that's going to scare the crap out of you even more. Right now, your children are receiving about 45 to 50 vaccines over the course of their childhood. All right? Mm-hmm. And you add boosters, the whole 9 yards, it could be as many as 100 vaccinations, not vaccines, but with boosters and everything, as much as 100 vaccinations some children will receive. In the pipeline right now, in different processes or different points of getting approved by the CDC, there are an additional 395 new vaccines waiting to be approved by the CDC. I just told you that they're getting about 50. I just told you that they can be tied to cognitive dysfunctions. I just gave you the symptoms of mercury poisoning and the symptoms of autism we physically see in children. One of the articles you will find in there is 395 new vaccines in the pipeline for approval. So we're talking about another 7 to 8 times the amount of vaccines our children already receive waiting to be approved. Is this genocide?
See, that's the thing. And when you take a look at the fact that they're also combining these vaccines, look,
yes.
If you want to argue that they've studied some of this stuff and have decided it's okay and everything else, they haven't studied the interactive nature of the chemical compounds when it comes to combining these vaccines. When I was growing up, there was an MMR vaccine, that's for sure. It was the measles, mumps, and rubella. That's exactly what it's named after. Go ahead and take a look at it. But now it's been enhanced. Okay, so there is additional stuff on this. And now there are all these different combo vaccines. We've also heard about the HPV vaccine, which is now being issued to, believe it or not, boys even. We're looking at all of these additional ones that have come out. Of course, the pneumonia vaccine, the chickenpox vaccine. This kind of stuff didn't exist when I was growing up. We weren't quite as brain damaged, were we? Well, I wonder why. And again, this is not to say that this is the only catalyst for this.
I don't believe it is.
This is just one.
And I do believe it is probably the major catalyst, because this is something that is being injected directly into the human body. Okay? We know that aluminum is used in a lot of vaccines as an aberrant. We know that for a fact. And what it basically does is it stimulates the immune system into hyperactivity so that the vaccine becomes supposedly more effective. Aluminum is deadly to brain cells. Aluminum is deadly to the central nervous system. Not quite as bad as mercury is, but just almost as bad, and it's in a lot more vaccines than thimerosal is. So if you're not getting the mercury, you're getting the aluminum. And we could go on. These things contain live viruses, but you made a real good point I need to speak to, Chuck. You made an excellent point, okay? When you combine all of these vaccines together, and you take your child to, say, the 12-month or the 14-month or whatever it is visit, and what they do is they give them maybe as many as 10 or 12 vaccinations at that point in time. If I went to the CDC or the EPA, or excuse me, or the FDA, and said, I've got 3 different drugs here. Each one of them are meant for something else in the human body. I want to put them together all in one pill and sell it. The FDA would laugh at you and kick you out of their office in a heartbeat. What they would tell you is you cannot combine those 3 drugs together because you don't know what the combination will do to the human physiology. You don't know what the interaction of those drugs, how it will affect the human physiology. Yet, through no long-term studies and no efficacy studies whatsoever on these vaccines, they combine 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of these vaccines, and maybe they don't combine them all into the same vaccination. They just sit there and stick you 3 or 4 or 5 times in a row. What happens to that stuff? It goes into the same body. It circulates through the same bloodstream. It attacks the same brain cells, and it is all combined within the fluids of your body. You might as well have gone to the FDA and said, I want to mix all these drugs together and sell one pill. The FDA would never approve that. But yet, they think nothing. The CDC thinks nothing of a child getting a half a dozen vaccines at one point in time or more. One may contain ethyl mercury, which again turns into methyl mercury, which again metabolizes into inorganic mercury, and a couple of them might contain live viruses and aluminum. You're sticking this infant child, which has an immune system which is not totally developed yet at 1 year of age, a blood-brain barrier. Do you know what your blood-brain barrier is for, people? Your blood-brain barrier is a magnificent thing that the human body has developed over the eons to block poisons from the brain. And one of the poisons it blocks from the brain so very well is, guess what? Metals, like aluminum and mercury. But let's tie one more poison in there. One more. Ever stop to wonder why, no matter how hard municipalities try, they cannot get the fluoride removed from their water? Do you know what happens when you drink fluoride? When you drink fluoride, it opens up the blood-brain barrier and allows metals such as mercury and aluminum to pass across the blood-brain barrier unhindered, where they begin to slaughter brain cells. If you think I'm kidding, you better do some research, and there's plenty of links for you to do that. So now we have a 12-month-old going in, getting 8 or 10 vaccines, a lot of these vaccines containing either ethyl mercury or aluminum. That child then is given anything, any water whatsoever drawn from the tap, or a lot of bottled water includes, believe it or not, fluoride in it. And once that child consumes, and this child doesn't even have a totally developed blood-brain barrier, so it's weak to start with. Now you introduce the fluoride into the system, which absolutely opens the floodgates and allows all of these metals into the system. It's not just that child, though. If you go in and get your flu shot, and then you go home and have a nice cold glass of ice water, all of the mercury in that flu shot, and I just told you, an adult getting a batch dose of the flu shot receives 3.5 times what the EPA states as a toxic level of mercury from that flu shot. But your blood-brain barrier says, oh, stop, you ain't getting in. So you go home and you have a glass of Kool-Aid. Yeah, let's drink the Kool-Aid, made from tap water. It has fluoride in it. And now what you've just done is you've bypassed the mechanism that protected your brain from the assault from that ethyl mercury in that flu shot. You have just opened the door and allowed it to go in and immediately start to slaughter brain cells. If it can do that for you, I also told you that a 12-month-old child receiving a flu shot by EPA standards is getting 11.9, let's round it off to 12 times what the EPA says is a toxic level of mercury. These are standards set down by the government. The government set these standards. The EPA is saying this is 12 times what we consider a toxic level. The CDC is saying, oh, don't worry about it. It's not going to hurt you. Get the shot. And that mother getting that shot, that pregnant mother getting that shot, is assaulting that fetus with 2,500 times the most toxic substance to the human brain naturally occurring on this planet. Why do we have the highest level of cognitive dysfunction in this country on the entire planet? Is there anybody here who can't connect the dots?
Nope, I don't think so. I think anybody that's listening to my show would understand that this is exactly how this stuff works. Of course, this, again, is not the only thing, because you have the environmental concerns, and of course, let's talk about the interactivity of chemicals really quickly. Okay, just a quick thought in my mind, because, another preservative is formaldehyde.
Oh, yeah, and that's also in vaccines.
And you'll find that in vaccines, and not only that, but look, if you don't get the vaccines, you can get it if you take your aspartame-loaded stuff. Aspartame... Yes. Absolutely metabolizes eventually. At one point, it turns into wood alcohol, but at another point, it turns into formaldehyde. Now, how does the human body metabolize this out? It doesn't. Okay? It doesn't. So you have a human body laden with formaldehyde, laden with fluoride, laden with... I don't know, other things that cause the alcohol level to rise, that cause the acid to rise in the body. All of these wonderful, wonderful things. And let's just shoot some more things in there that'll cause the metals to be excellent carriers straight into the blood-brain barrier, because that, of course, has been now taken out by the fact that the fluoride has gotten in there. It's just a wonderful system. And you know what? It seems as though, again... I mean, maybe I'm just crazy, but it's done on purpose.
You're not crazy. Stop and think about this. How can you be crazy? I told you that mercury in vaccines and aluminum in vaccines is not the only catalyst. One of the shows I did with Dr. David Lewis, who is an EPA whistleblower, states that the sludge, all of these toxins, including very high concentrations of lead and other toxic metals that are pulled out of your water through sewage treatment plants, there's so much of it pulled out, and it forms basically a sludge. That sludge is dried, and then the EPA allows this sludge, which now looks like dirt, to be sold at Walmart for organic compost for your gardens. It is spread on your children's playgrounds. This is a fact, okay? Mm-hmm. And again, Dr. Lewis has all of this documented in his book, Science for Sale, and Dr. Lewis is a part of the Liberty Beacon Project. He heads up our scientific staff. And what we're looking at is concentrations of lead, concentrations of arsenic, and other things that your children play in every day.
Well, Roger, this way they don't have to eat the paint chips.
But the concentrations, and a lot of people are going to push back, so you really need to go to the Liberty Beacon and look at these articles. Just go to the Liberty Beacon website, put in Dr. David Lewis in the search bar, hit enter, you'll come up with the articles I'm talking about. The concentrations in this dried sludge that they put on your children's playground, golf courses, you put in your garden, is over 1 million times what the EPA allows in your drinking water. I'm going to say that again a little slower so you don't think that I made a mistake. The concentrations of these environmental biotoxins is 1 million times higher than what is in the EPA allows in your drinking water because that's where it's extracted from in these sewage treatment plants. So it's not just the vaccines. It's not just the aluminum or the mercury. What I will tell you is the rise in autism, the curve, almost perfectly matches the rise in the number and the amount of vaccinations we have been exposed to over the last 6 generations. Is it the only catalyst? No. Do I believe it is one of the biggest catalysts? Yes. Do environmental toxins, as you so aptly put, Chuck, play an integral role in this? When you are telling me my 5 or 6 or 7-year-old kid is playing in dirt on the playground on the school he goes to with concentrations of lead and arsenic and other biotoxins 1,000,000 times higher than what's allowed in our drinking water, and the EPA has been aware of this for well over a generation. It's not just vaccines. So you are absolutely right, Chuck. But how many people out there know this? How many people? You need to find the book on Amazon called Science for Sale. You need to look at some of the articles that Dr. David Lewis and the shows I've done with him that are on the Liberty Beacon. Listen to the shows, read the articles. If you think that I exaggerated that 1 million number even to the slightest, he says at least 1,000,000 times, meaning in some cases it's much higher. So we are assaulting them with lead. We're assaulting them with arsenic. We're assaulting them with aluminum. We're assaulting them with thimerosal or mercury. And yet we wonder why this country has the highest level of autism, the highest level of ADHD, the highest level of dementia, the highest level of Alzheimer's, every cognitive dysfunction on this planet we're gold medal winners at. But that's just a coincidence, right? That's just a coincidence. We are also the most vaccinated society on the planet, bar none, and by a very large margin.
And all you have to do is generate one of those wonderful charts where you can watch, something rise, on a bar, right? On like a bar graph or one of these other charts. And you know what? It doesn't quite exactly line up, but it's pretty close. It's pretty close when you look at the increase in autism versus the increase in vaccination. It almost seems as though that is the only cause, but we know better. We know better.
It's not. But at the same time, it is the main catalyst because what you breathe in or absorb through your skin on the playgrounds, okay, is pretty much filtered to some aspect by the body. Mm-hmm. What you take in a syringe and inject directly through the protective lining of the skin, through the negating the protective lining of the lungs, what you inject directly into the human body has got to have the biggest effect on the human physiology. And we're talking about receiving not vaccines, maybe 40-something to 50 vaccines, but over 100 vaccinations with 395, almost 400 more in the pipeline waiting to come down. And the AMA is pushing to increase the amount of vaccines that contain thimerosal because it's cheaper to use that as a preserving agent than anything else. The AMA. So what we're looking at is, okay, we vaccinate everybody and we sacrifice the lives of the few to keep healthy the lives of the many.
Yeah, but that's
Do you want to take a chance that your child is what they consider one of the few? And how many is too many? And how many is a few? And who's doing these statistics? And where's the long-term efficacy of these vaccines to show us this? And why has it never been presented to the public? Why are we being told it was never done in the first place? And that's my hour. And I could have gone on this for hours and hours and hours. But I do respect the fact that you have a phenomenal guest coming in, a friend of mine. As a matter of fact, she will be starting her own talk show on the Liberty Beacon Radio Network here real soon, and I will be her first guest on her first show. So if you wouldn't mind, Chuck, I'd like to stick around just long enough to say hello to your next guest, and then I will graciously bow out.
Absolutely, Roger. We're going to do that. I'm just waiting on Dr. Rebecca Carley to call in. She's going to be doing that very, very shortly. And, I did want to make sure that we allowed you the full hour because I knew that it was going to be even tough to sort of cram this all into 1 hour.
Well, if you take a look, I've got over 50 links. They're all active links. All you have to do is click on them and an article's going to open up. And they all are on the Liberty Beacon. That doesn't mean they all came from the Liberty Beacon. That means that we searched the internet and found the best of the best and brought them to the Liberty Beacon. So although they all say www.thelibertybeacon.com, whatever the article is, they come from absolutely phenomenal, like VAC Truth and a lot of other really good forums across the internet, and we give credit to every forum they come from. At the bottom of every article that we have taken from anybody else's site with permission, we do give a link back to the original article, and we do give credit to the original site and the author. So don't think that all of these articles were written by the Liberty Beacon, and so if you don't think we've got any credibility, then nothing we have here has credibility. These articles come from across the internet. This is a virtual library, Chuck.
Yeah, I see that, and there's also PDFs in there, which are representative of hard copy studies. Yep. There's a bunch of stuff. I mean, there is just like I say again, a plethora of information here from varying sources that are all saying essentially the same thing, and but in all different ways, addressing slightly different parts of the issue. I'm sure there's an article in there. I haven't read them all. I got to be honest with you because I wasn't aware of this particular article, even though it was published a little ways back. I was aware of some of the articles I see on the list, though. And the thing is this, I know for sure there are probably so many things on there that one could sort of get lost in it. But this is something that is definitely worth study and requires a lot of study.
There's one that I really would like parents to read, and it's a relatively new article, and it's 2/3 of the way down that list, and it's Boy Gets Diagnosed with Autism After 32 Vaccines. After receiving 30, perfectly healthy, normal child. After his 32nd vaccine. Okay? His entire life changed, and he is very, very autistic at this point. That article is written by a lot of what you will read in there is the observations of the mother, and this mother is beating herself up and blaming no one but herself.
Well, and this has been the mistake in a lot of cases, the appeal to authority. I mean, I've even talked to you about this before, especially in a medical sense, that so many of us have sort of trusted physicians who quite often are carrying an agenda with them. And I did save my personal sort of interaction with this for Dr. Carley because
I'm sure
we didn't have any chance to have a discussion, Dr. Carley and myself. But I'll tell you what, two things that are interesting here is I know she'll have some helpful information for me personally because, as you well know, I just recently had another child. He's 4 months old, and he hasn't been vaccinated, although they did stick him with that vitamin K on his way out of the hospital, much to my dismay. And yes, I did require a hospital to get that done, people. There was really no choice. But anyway, the thing is, I've so far avoided having to vaccinate him. But, of course, there are a great many issues that come along with that when you do this. So I'm hoping that this is what I'll be able to talk to Dr. Carley about. And she's with us now, Roger, by the way. Can you hear me, Dr. Carley?
I can hear you.
All right.
Hello, Dr. Carly. How are you today, my friend?
I'm doing well. Sounds like you got your computer finally, right?
No, I don't. I'm using someone else's, but that's neither here nor there. Did you get a chance to listen to some of the discussion that I put forward?
No, he just told me to call in at 7, so I'm calling in at 7.
Okay, I'm going to give you the name of the article that we discussed, and then I'm going to bow out because I really want you and Chuck to have a chance to interact. Chuck is a very, 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 very good at leading a discussion, and Chuck, I know you're aware of this, is also the director of the Liberty Beacon Project's media department. But the name of the article we just discussed, and one that I wrote, is Autism and Vaccines, Utter Catastrophe in America and a Government That Just Doesn't Give a Damn.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say that's about right, Dr. Carly?
Right. Well, it's not just autism. It's all autoimmune disease, non-traumatic seizures, and cancer in people and in pets. But yes, the autism community has been trying to, get some acknowledgement of the vaccine-induced cause for years and years, and they've been totally ignored.
All right. Well, I'm going to leave the two of you be. I wish I could listen in, but I can't. I have another call to jump on. Chuck, thank you so much. As usual, you're such a gracious host, and I really do appreciate the time every Tuesday. And Dr. Carly, I'm sure that you're going to lead Chuck through a very, very interesting conversation over the next hour.
Okay.
Well, thanks a lot, Roger. I really appreciate you making time for me every Tuesday and for my listeners. And again, you can find that article, if you didn't see the link in chat, at thelibertybeacon.com. I would go there. And, of course, I always say, don't forget the Falling Darkness, .com, because both places are definitely valid and in need of your study if you haven't been there. And if you have been there, maybe you should go back because, again, there is a plethora of articles on there that are most informative, and I'm just happy to be a part of all of this, Roger. Thank you.
All right. Have a great day. Bye.
Bye-bye.
So, Dr. Carly.
Yes.
As I said before, you and I haven't actually spoken before, so just for the benefit of the listeners and kind of for myself, you are an MD, and would you just give us sort of a little introduction to who you are and what your areas of interest are and things like that?
Sure. Yes, I'm a medical doctor. I was trained as a surgeon. I stopped working in the hospital in the early 1990s after witnessing euthanasia, research fraud, and experimentation on people. And I thought that was bad. And then I took time off to have my son, who's now 18. I didn't know about vaccines. He got all his vaccines. He became brain damaged. So I started studying alternative therapies, especially homeopathy. I developed a protocol to reverse all these vaccine-induced diseases, which, as I said, it basically covers every disease in internal medicine, in people and in pets. And so around that time, almost 18 years ago, after I reversed my son's brain damage, I started helping other people. I have clients all over the world. I do consults for people. Of course, it's not just vaccines. It's pesticides, fluoride, aspartame. The list is endless of the things that we're being poisoned with. And so I develop an individual protocol for each person or pet based on their history. If people want, I have two websites, but the best website to start with is Reversing Vaccine Induced, INDUCED, diseases.com. And so I started speaking out around that time, almost 18 years ago. I started on public access in Long Island. I was on public access for 9 years. And then when the internet started, being developed and shows were on the internet, I started doing internet radio shows as well, exposing all these things. And that's when the hammer came down. And, anybody that becomes a whistleblower soon learns that it's not appreciated. So that's been my experience.
Well, right, and obviously, you definitely were going to face a lot of pushback, a lot of blowback when it comes to being a medical professional, and speaking against the canon of medical wisdom, right?
Right. Well, that's what makes me so dangerous, actually, because people actually contact me and listen to me because I'm a medical doctor, and I always laugh and I say, that's the last reason you should be coming to me. The only place my medical education helps me is that I know what they do. I've witnessed what they do, and I had to learn how to reverse what they do. But yes, in fact, it's a very interesting road, especially when you talk about vaccines. Apparently, vaccines is the sacred cow of Big Pharma because they create the diseases and
There we go. I might. All right. It looks like I'm back. The thing is, the big pharma generally what they do is they create the disease and then they create the solution. So you have the problem and reaction, which is the solution, being provided all by one wonderful, large, overarching entity, as it were, being the larger pharmaceutical interests and the medical community at large. And what you were able to do is to know from the inside, because you were one of these professionals, that the methodology, let's just say, by which all of this stuff is done. And I'm sorry I lost you there for a minute.
Yeah, this happens a lot.
What can you do? But of course, the moment you start to speak against any of the established wisdom, it seems as though electronic problems happen, don't they?
Yep.
But I was explaining the point you were making before you broke up, which is that that effectively you do become extremely dangerous when you speak against the generally accepted wisdom in any particular profession, especially when it comes to the medical profession, because after all, medical professionals at this point have become agents of the larger pharmaceutical interests.
Yeah.
And I take for an example in my own life, when my son was born, which he was born at the end of June, and he was in the hospital, a pediatrician was presented to me, and he was immediately talking to me about this hepatitis B vaccine, and how he wanted to see this administered to my son before he left the hospital. And I gave him an argument that I found no reason to give a hepatitis B vaccine to an infant. And that there was absolutely no medical cause for this in my mind. And he sort of agreed with me, but then looked at me kind of blandly and told me, but it is part of the schedule. Now, I got away with it, like I said before, I don't know if you heard it, I mean, my son did get stuck with the vitamin K, much to my dismay, before we left the hospital, but didn't get anything else. And thus far, he's been pretty healthy. And I'm trying to familiarize myself with the process by which I have to deal with this in the state of North Carolina, which is where I find myself nowadays. Because this does cause an issue regarding, trying to put your children into daycare or school or other situations where they're going to interact with others. Automatically, you're supposed to present a shot record, as if this is, a requisite for interacting with others in the public in general. So this is a large part of the problem, and part of the reason why a lot of people give into this, regardless of or being completely ignorant of the amount of damage it can cause.
Yes, it's absolutely disgusting to me how many parents just submit to the boot. Because actually the doctors are agents for the government as well. This is a government agenda. The CDC is a for-profit corporation, just like all levels of government, the courts, etc., etc. And as we know, they've been working on the Ebola vaccine for a number of years. It's funny how they seem to know this was going to happen. And, it's another situation. They're going to make billions off it. So, of course, I can't give legal advice. I can't even give medical advice. I don't practice medicine. The first thing they did was go after my medical license, saying I have a delusion of conspiracy. And I've never even had a complaint against me, even when I was a surgeon. So I've gone through quite a bit, to tell the truth. But what I tell people, first of all, you can't count on the religious exemptions because in places like New York, they've actually put a cap on the number of exemptions that schools can take, because they only get federal funding if a certain percentage of the children are vaccinated. So that's the hook they, put over the heads of the daycares and the schools, et cetera. The best thing I know of, which is something I only learned about a few months ago, is to refuse to contract with them. They are for-profit corporations. There is no constitution anymore. We're basically a gigantic corporation here in this country at all levels. And the best thing I can suggest to people is to go to the following website, the anticorruptionsociety.com, anticorruptionsociety.com, and at the top of the page, you will see there's many places where this information is contained, but the person who runs the site, Al Whitney, has put it all together in one document entitled Lawfully Yours. She's actually developed what she calls pocket cards that you can give to these individuals, which basically says, I'm not going to contract with you. I'm not, under your jurisdiction, and you have nothing to say about my child. Of course, one of the important things you have to do is stay away from the pediatricians. There are a few pediatricians who are now realizing that they can get a lot more clients if they, offer not to push vaccinations on the well-informed parents. Of course, the ones who aren't informed, they'll vaccinate them up the wazoo. But, as I said, more and more pediatricians are now accepting parents that don't vaccinate, because many of them are actually firing parents. If you go in and say, I'm not going to vaccinate, they say you'll have to find another doctor. Mm-hmm. Well, you don't need a doctor in the first place. What do these doctors do? They weigh the child, they measure the child, they give vaccines and cause all these diseases. You can weigh your own child, you can measure your own child, and as you said, if you don't vaccinate them, they're going to be just fine.
Right. I just did a quick thing. I typed into my search bar. I came up with the anticorruptionsociety.org. Is that the one you're talking about?
No, it's anticorruptionsociety.com.
Oh, okay.
Maybe somebody, see, this is what happens sometimes. Another website will be created to distract people away from the real deal. Hold on a second. Let me just see if I can get the direct link, and then maybe I can send it to you. It's just definitely, there's no "the" in there. It's just anticorruptionsociety.com.
Oh, okay.
So there you go. So interesting that somebody has started another website with very similar name. So
yeah, that often happens, right?
Yes.
So the one that I'm supposed to be looking at is the one that actually starts out with the black bold letters at the top and then says home, about, and CDC exposed are the first three things up on the subjects, right?
Right. And
okay.
I'm sending you a direct link to that lawfully yours document.
Oh,
So
excellent.
Check that out when you have time. And everybody has to check these things out because people have no idea about what's really going on. When you realize that our government is a corporation, all the people in Congress, legislators, from the federal to the local level, they all know this. And they hide this from the people. And this is very important because this is how they control us. They get us to consent. It's called treason. And thankfully, many people are waking up to this at this point. But this is the most important document I ever read because I went through 7 years in 7 courts after they took my son away from me, which is another torture they put on me to shut me up. Then with my whole medical board experience, and you see nothing but corruption and fraud. And you feel like, oh, wow, I learned we have the best legal system in the world. Well, now I know what's really going on. And you have to learn this to protect yourself because it's ugly out there. And the attorneys, the only group worse than the doctors, in my opinion, are the attorneys. They are the absolute worst. They will never tell you the truth about anything. Oftentimes, they will sell you out. As a matter of fact, I know of many people who have had, medical malpractice committed against them or their family members. Some lawyer will take the case, and then next thing you know, he's missing a deadline or something happens along those lines. And that's when you know he got paid to throw the case. So and there is no pill for injustice. I know how to reverse pretty much all diseases with natural therapies, but once you go through such a thing as that, the corruption in the courts and things of that nature, it's hard to keep breathing after that happens to you.
Well, a lot of what happens regarding autism it has to do with diet, right? This is one of the things that I see focused on regarding how to reverse the damage that's caused by vaccine injury.
No, I have to interrupt you.
Okay.
Autism is actually subacute sclerosing panencephalitis. On my Reversing Vaccine-Induced Diseases.com site, on the Vaccine-Induced Disease tab, you can see the actual page from my medical book, Harrison's Principles of Internal Medicine, which all doctors all over the world, that's how they learn internal medicine in medical school. And it took me a few years to catch up on my sleep after, leaving the hospital, working 120-hour work weeks, things like that. But I saved all my books. And one day I was flipping through that book, and I came across the definition of subacute sclerosing panencephalitis caused by the measles virus. When you read that, you realize they're talking about autism. You see, and this is another place the scammers come in. The MMR vaccine has never had mercury, ever. Okay? Mercury has nothing to do with autism. Mercury and aluminum are highly involved in Alzheimer's disease, and certainly mercury is a toxic metal. It shouldn't be in your vaccines. It shouldn't be in your teeth. But what happens is the autoimmune attack can be anywhere on the body. With all of these brain conditions, Tourette's syndrome, all the different types of, autism, PPD, and all these things, they keep splitting it up because it's getting too obvious that this is a massive epidemic. Even criminal behavior and bullying. There's a very excellent book, Vaccination, Social Violence, and Criminality, by Harris Coulter, PhD, which ties all this together. So the only thing that determines what symptoms you develop is where the brain is attacked. And what happens is you have antibodies against the myelin, and then once enough damage is done to that myelin sheath, which is to the brain what the plastic coating is on an electrical cord. It's the insulation. And so that's what allows conduction to take place. Once you get enough damage, conduction no longer takes place. That's why these autistic children, they've got all kinds of symptoms. Most of them have no eye contact. Most of them can't talk. They flap their hands and do things like that. But I've reversed over 4,000 cases of autism, and I've had all kinds of combos: diabetes and autism, seizures and autism, asthma and autism. It just depends on where the autoimmune attack is. Now, in terms of the gut is also attacked by, these immune cells. As a matter of fact, that's one reason why so many children have egg allergies, because they're making vaccines out of eggs. So because of the injection of the vaccine bypassing the normal natural immunity, it corrupts the immune system. And when I start my show on Liberty Beacon, which hopefully will be very soon, that's one of the things I want to talk about, is exactly how this corruption in the immune system occurs. But the bottom line is, once they have these problems with their gut, it's called leaky gut. Undigested food particles get into the bloodstream. You develop antibodies against those undigested food particles, and that's how you get food allergies. Now, as it turns out, the ones they usually talk about are gluten and casein in milk. And those things are very bad. Nobody should be drinking milk. And, of course, wheat is highly GMO now as well. So, yes, it does do some help to stop feeding them these foods. But you can become allergic to anything. And I had one client in Greece, all he could eat was rice cakes. He was allergic to everything. So the good news is these things can be reversed. But, the better thing is to not let it happen in the first place.
Well, I was thinking about that while you were speaking because, when a child is first born, their neurological insulation, as it were, isn't actually developed for 18 to 24 months, right? So isn't it even more susceptible, their entire system more susceptible when they're in those first 2 years of life?
It's insane. I can't tell you how insane it is. I've been doing this work for almost 2 decades now. I have been researching. I have thousands of documents. There have been articles published, not much in the U.S., but especially in other countries, about what vaccines really do to the body. And when you start these assaults, on day one, the child was just born. They're not going to be shooting up drugs. They're not going to be having, promiscuous sex in the nursery. Whoever came up with this idea was obviously for the purpose of disease creation and making big bucks. It had nothing to do with protecting the baby.
Well, yeah, that was the thing with the Hep B vaccine. Immediately, this is new, too, because I have older children, and they didn't push this up until very recently. And it's just, I said to myself, look, if the kid's not being tattooed, having promiscuous sex, or an IV drug user, what is the point of giving them a Hep B vaccine?
There is absolutely none except for to create disease. And let me just also say, it's not just the start of the assault on day one. If you look at the schedule for vaccines, which the American Academy of Pediatrics, which gets lots of money from Big Pharma, legislators in different states, which get lots of donations from Big Pharma, they just basically stick a vaccine on the schedule once it's been developed. There's no rhyme or reason for this. It's an assault to the immune system. It's totally overwhelming the immune system. And they're coming up with shots. There's a new one now, Pentavix. It's got six vaccines in one shot. They just keep loading them up. I mean, I probably had, I'm trying to think of the most vaccines I've ever seen on a child, 40 or 50 by age 5. And the more they have, the more of a medical issue they'll have.
Well, right, and I mean, even outside of autism, you have all sorts of different problems, like you were saying, using the eggs and different things that don't seem like they would be harmful, but when they're mixed into these cocktails, they become extremely problematic for all sorts of organ systems. I've read stuff that, and I don't know if this is correct or not, but I've read stuff that links Crohn's disease to this as well.
Yes, exactly. Ulcerative colitis, leaky gut, as I said, any part of the body can be attacked. You name an organ or an organ system, it can be attacked. The lungs are attacked, you get asthma. If the pancreas is attacked, you get insulin-dependent diabetes. If the kidneys are attacked, you get renal failure. And on and on and on. And this is all from vaccines. And the only thing that determines where you're going to develop an issue is your genetics. You see, they're blaming genetics for everything, but in reality, you get the quality of your immune system from your parents. If you have good genetics, you're going to be able to handle more assaults. But if they keep shooting you up, eventually you're going to have a problem. And let me just mention one of the most heinous things I've discovered. I always knew this, but now I have proof. There's a very important website, Dr. Palevsky, PALEVSKY.com. Check out the article, do a search. Peanut oil used in vaccines since the 1960s. Why do you think these children are having life-threatening attacks? They can be sitting in a cafeteria, smell their neighbor's peanut butter sandwich, and go into anaphylactic shock. This is because their immune system has been sensitized to peanuts that were put in vaccines.
See, I've never actually had anybody explain that to me, because I've always contended that that this rapid increase in the percentage of kids that have these peanut allergies. I mean, a peanut allergy when I was a kid, and I was only born in the early 70s, a peanut allergy was something you heard of like an urban legend. You might have heard that there was a kid somewhere in the state that had a peanut allergy. You know what I mean?
Right.
But now they're everywhere.
They're everywhere. Right, and what happens? Can you imagine the stress to a child of knowing that if, somebody gives them anything to eat, that has a peanut in it, they can end up in anaphylactic shock. That's why all these children are now carrying around EpiPen, which is epinephrine. And they have to stab themselves on the side of the leg and give themselves these shots, or they will die.
Yeah, my son who was born in 2002, who's my namesake, actually has to carry one of these EpiPens because his throat will close up. He will go into anaphylactic shock if he eats anything with peanuts. Even the slightest hint of peanuts and things could potentially kill him.
Well, now you know why. Definitely check out that article. It will really get your blood pressure up. This is pure evil what they're doing.
See, and I've never had anybody actually explain that to me. I just kind of accepted it because it just seemed to be the way of things, but I've been remiss really in checking that out. But it does make sense now that you've explained it. If they're introducing this stuff and creating the sensitivities, I mean, it's just so evil. When you think about the amount of stuff that's actually manufactured utilizing nuts, utilizing peanuts, utilizing tree nuts of all sorts, I mean, my son cannot go near anything that has peanut butter or just about any kind of nut possible. And I guess that's what the point is. They use the oils, I suppose, or some sort of extracts in the vaccines, and it makes sense. He also had an allergy to the milk protein when he was a baby and couldn't consume the baby formula, which I was using the powdered pre-canned stuff and all that at that time, and he was basically sick from all of it.
Right.
And what the doctors determined that I got to think about this. The hospital in Jersey City, New Jersey, was that I can't remember. Oh, Robert Wood Johnson. Excuse me. That was the name of the hospital. What they determined there is that he was actually allergic to one protein in milk, and this caused just about every baby formula that was made to not work for him, and they had to give us something special, which although he was able to eat, I think made him worse.
Mm-hmm. Well, everything they do is bad, and it's too bad that your child's mother wasn't able to breastfeed, because of course that's the best way to go. But if you look at the ingredients on these cans of baby formula, you would be shocked at the stuff that's in there. And, of course, they don't even tell you everything that is in there. But just getting back to the peanut allergy situation for a minute, nobody else will tell you this. I figured this out myself years ago. Once I saw the agenda once I knew what they were doing intentionally, I figured it out. But this Dr. Pilevsky, he's the first one that has documented it. You see, I have so much information. I could do research 24 hours a day. There's so much information out there about vaccines. Of course, you have to vet it. You have to make sure that you're not reading something that was published by Big Pharma, or that, any of these fake, fraudulent scientists had anything to do with. But, it's just mind-boggling. But this Dr. Pilevsky took a special interest in, he obviously, red flag went up in his brain as well, and he did the research and he found out, yep, they've been doing this since the 1960s. So just imagine how many children are having to live this life of stress and carry around these EpiPens, never knowing when they're going to stop breathing.
Yeah, like I said, my son still, he lives with my ex-wife now, but whenever he comes to see me, I have to make sure he has that thing with him because of this situation, and it's just horrendous, really, especially when he was very small and didn't quite understand. We went through a couple of episodes where, he had to be taken to an emergency room, before we learned what was going on. And that's post the whole protein problem in the milk, of course.
Right.
And it's still with him to this day. And believe me, this kid is extremely cautious, and this is one of his biggest anxieties is about what he eats because of this. So you're dead on there, and I can tell you that just as the father of one of these kids.
Well, I certainly hope that your ex-wife is not vaccinating him anymore.
Well, I got to admit it's not a fight I can win at this point.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's really a rough point for me, to be honest with you, because no matter what I've tried to explain, she absolutely seems to put her faith in these doctors that and no offense to you, by the way, but I've never really had a great liking for doctors to begin with. Just in general.
I offended? My goal is to cause the death of medicine. As I said in the beginning, I witnessed euthanasia, research fraud, experimentation on people. I have a conscience. I went to medical school because I wanted to help people. When I saw what they were really up to, I was outraged. And I decided, I'm not going to stand for this. I'm going to expose it. Little did I know what the outcome would be, but I have no regrets. And of course, I know that David Lewis, PhD, the author of Science for Sale, is very much affiliated with the Liberty Beacon. And everybody should get his book and read what's really going on. He worked for the EPA, knows what's going on in the CDC. All research is fraud, okay? And he came out and he started speaking about it as well, and has experienced some ramifications of that. And let me just say, I run into this all the time. You have two parents, one of them has done their homework, one of them has not. And the one who has not believes in medicine. It's like a religion now. The vaccines are the baptismal rites. Right. And then you get egos involved, especially if there's somebody in medicine within the family. If you've got a nurse or a doctor on one side or the other, then, they're going to be told that your spouse is nuts and, this is the best thing since sliced bread, et cetera, And oftentimes, one parent just is not going to be willing to do any checking at all. Mm-hmm. And at the risk of the child's death and maiming. I mean, it's really very sad. And what I've noticed over the years, it used to be the mothers who were doing the homework. Now it's totally flipped 180. It's almost always the fathers. And I don't know what's up with the mothers, but many of them are just deciding to go with the flow and, be good little slaves and do what they're told. And they watch side effect after side effect, especially when they start writing the drugs. But they keep doing it. And let me just say one last thing. I'm sorry to hog so much time. My own family doesn't listen to me. The White Coats have killed both of my parents, my two younger brothers, and now they're killing my younger sister with chemo and radiation. And Each one watches the last one be killed. There's no question that the doctors are killing them, and they keep going back for more. And I just shake my head, but the bottom line is I don't waste my time with them anymore. See, ignorance is like a defense. They mostly at this point, I think most people smell a rat, but they know that if they start digging, it's going to be a black hole, and they just can't face it.
Well, see, now that's funny because you almost perfectly describe what my situation is here regarding, my son, is that everything that has gone on and all of the medical wisdom that she has garnered from people, there is somebody close to her that's affiliated with the stuff. And, of course, we're also looking at the, they know better, and no matter what medications and things they seem to give them to take care of this and that disorder, what have you, he seems to get worse. And I'm complaining the whole time, but I'm just out of my mind, and I think I'm smarter than doctors, and I'm not smarter than a doctor, so therefore, she's going to go along with that program. And I just simply tried to present it to her as, why don't you at least question this stuff? When I noticed that because of his attention deficit, they were giving him something that was pharmaceutically related to amphetamines, I was outraged, and I tried to present this to her as, don't you at least question this? And of course, I'm just, out of my mind, and I think I know better than everybody, and it becomes an ego problem exactly as you described.
Right.
So I actually feel a little better now because I know that I'm not alone.
Oh, no, you're not alone. And let me just say, to me, there is no excuse for people to at least check out the side effects of the medications that they're on. You type in the name of the drug, hyphen side effects in any search engine, see what Big Pharma admits to. In regards to vaccines, you will see that no vaccine has ever been tested to see if it causes cancer, including the Gardasil vaccine, because they know they cause cancer. Cancer is big money, okay? Mm-hmm. And all of these other drugs. I've had, especially elderly people, on as many as 25 drugs at one time. They're like a toxic cesspool. Nobody knows the, combined effects of all these drugs together, and especially in the elderly, because even blood pressure medications causes loss of memory. Check it out for yourself, please, people. Don't believe me. I was shocked and horrified, and it's really amazing because in medical school, you get this physician's desk reference, which you could use it to build up your muscles. Now, the book is so heavy, you have to use two hands to even pick it up.
Right.
And the doctors never look in that book. They never check out the side effects. If a patient comes in with, symptom X, and they get a drug for that symptom, and then they start taking the drug and they get a new symptom, does the doctor look up to see if the drug for symptom X has a side effect that's now the new symptom being presented? Never. They add another drug to the cocktail.
I was going to say they stack another prescription on top of that is what they do. Oh, this causes muscle pain. Well, I'll give you something for your muscle pain. Oh, your muscle pain medicine causes you headaches. I'll give you something for your headaches. This is what it is. And after a while, you got people on 20, 30 medications all at once. And nobody is really monitoring the interactivity of these chemicals, right?
Right.
And I know this is going to sound strange because we're getting close to running out of time here, and wow, an hour flew by just listening to you. First let me just say it's been absolutely amazing to even talk to you because I'm hearing the knowledge and the wisdom that I hope I would get from a regular physician somewhere, but I never do. So I just want to say that really quickly. But and I'm going to throw something at you strange, and I don't know if you have any views on this, but I mean, looking at the current Ebola hysteria, okay, and taking a look at how they're developing a vaccine for it and whatnot, and these specialized experimental treatments and all that. I mean, do you have anything to say about that?
Yes. The Ebola vaccine, whatever's in there, and we never know unless we make it ourselves. But, the 3,000 bioworker labs in the United States, that's what they do, is they weaponize viruses. So whenever you hear about an emerging virus, you know it emerged from a lab someplace. The vaccine is how they're going to spread the disease. As a matter of fact, something called colloidal silver kills every bug that's ever been tested. Every bug. As a matter of fact, the Department of Defense experimented on Ebola and other hemorrhagic viruses using silver. And this has disappeared from the internet, but I have a copy of the study. So there goes the fear. And, of course, the FDA is trying to take colloidal silver off the market. It's a big threat to Big Pharma. So what I tell people, what I would do if I was you, is get your own generator. And then you can make your own for the rest of your life. On my reversing vaccine-induced diseases.com site, at the bottom on the links page, you can learn about the generator that I use. My 3 dogs, myself, and my 2 cats take it every day. You can breathe it in. It's just amazing. It's been around for a couple hundred years. But, you know, the Big Pharma, it actually used to be in the physician's desk reference. I checked back. They took it out in the 1980s. So that's first of all, don't be scared. Second of all, don't get vaccinated, because that's how they're going to spread who knows what. Okay, they'll call it Ebola, and that's another thing I tell people. The hospitals are now like government internment camps. If you go to a white coat and you tell them you have a fever and diarrhea, they're going to call the CDC. And you're going to end up in quarantine or something, okay? So, you know, you really have to be very careful of these people. They are the enemy. And I just want to also say, when you said before that your wife tells you, well, who do you think you are? You're not a doctor. You didn't go to medical school. I always laugh when people say to me, oh, I'm not a doctor, so blah, blah, blah. Well, guess what? You still have common sense. And you know that injecting poison into you is not going to be good for you. You don't have to have a medical degree to erase that common sense, you know, from your brain. So, in my opinion, there's really no more knowledgeable group out there than the parents, especially the mothers of the autistic children. They do their homework. They find out different biomedical treatments to help their children. And as I said, my protocol, I've reversed over 4,000 cases. I use homeopathy and other things, which, of course, I never learned that word homeopathy in medical school. But people have to stop trusting the government, stop trusting all the, you know, licensed professionals. They went through brainwashing and mind control, and once they get their license, they know that they may lose their license if they speak out and tell the truth. So you have to, you know, protect yourself and your family.
Right, and this is the point after all, because you know, when your faith resides in those who are wearing white coats to protect you, and they're basically being bought off in a lot of cases, not just by the general medical society, and I do hold up the air quotes when I say that, medical society, but also by Big Pharma directly. I mean, we all know about the drug reps that come in and drop off their free samples and make their suggestions for their new stuff that these doctors have not studied, that they simply prescribe, and in most cases the cure is a whole lot worse than the illness. But they don't actually know, do they? In most cases, but they do know that they get their checks, they get their free lunches, they get their notepads and pens and things from these people, and this is the way business is done, and it's a business now. It's not about the Hippocratic Oath anymore, is it?
No, all they do is harm, and it's a lot worse than some lunches and notes and pens. I mean, these doctors are getting kickbacks, especially for off-label use of drugs, which is technically not approved by the FDA, but the doctors can still do it. And there's even been some 60-minute specials on this, which, 60 Minutes is pretty mainstream media garbage now at this point. But even they have done a couple exposés on this. So what are these doctors motivated by? They're motivated by having a Mercedes in their driveway. That's it. And, there's something called the standard of care. That's another way that they're basically putting doctors into a box. If a patient comes in with a bunch of symptoms, basically they'll get out their, laptop or whatever. They'll just stick in the symptoms. They'll come up with a diagnosis. They don't even think for themselves anymore. And then once you get a diagnosis, you just start them on the drugs. So that's how it works. They spend, maybe 5 minutes with a person. They don't ask them about toxin exposure, such as pesticides, fluoride, all these things, because they can't admit that these things are toxins. So they're very dangerous. I can't tell you how dangerous these doctors have become. And you see, that's why I am one of their main enemies, because I went through their training. I saw what they do, and I came out to expose it all. And I have 2 books I'm working on, and when I tell what I saw in the hospital, I'm telling you, a lot of people are going to be really shocked. It's evil. As a matter of fact, these hospices, they're killing people. That's what they do. They put you in a hospice, they pump up the morphine, you stop breathing. I've even had a couple of situations where people would call me and say, my grandmother's in the hospice. The hospice called us and said, if you want to say goodbye to Grandma, you better be here Tuesday by 4. Well, what does that mean? That they're going to kill her Tuesday at 5, okay? This is intentional murder, not to mention the fact that many of these people could be healed with natural therapy. So murder by medicine, it happens every day. And, we have almost 1 million people in prison now for whatever, Why aren't any doctors in prison? The only one that ever went to prison, and that was only for 2 years, is this Conrad Murray, who murdered Michael Jackson. Involuntary manslaughter, how is that involuntary when you stick a needle in somebody and give them an anesthetic without any resuscitative equipment? That's murder, okay? So, as you see, I could go on for days, but I know we're almost out of time.
Well, right, and I really want to thank you for coming on, highly enlightening, and I look forward to hearing a lot more from you. I got to be honest, I had not heard you directly before. I have heard of you, and it's funny because a lot of people do reference you and say, you've got to hear Dr. Carley speak about these things that are making you upset when it comes to the, the medical societies, the white coats, as you put it, and I think that's a perfect way to put it. Because it's like the white coat society. It's not just the MDs necessarily, but the entire system has entirely failed. It's not a matter of health care at all. It's a matter of sick care, and it's a matter of managed death, in my opinion, at this point in time. And of course, again, I didn't go to their schools and learn this stuff. I just, have my eyes open and I see what happens.
Right. And it's not just the medical doctors. It's the veterinarians. It's the dentists. They've all been mind-controlled and brainwashed into doing bad things. Okay, so, this is huge. It's absolutely huge. And like I said, I'm not here to scare people. Actually, you can be very healthy just by avoiding these people and find natural solutions.
Well, right. There is practically no ailment on the planet, as far as I'm concerned, that probably that in all likelihood cannot be cured by something fully natural, by a plant that does exist already somewhere. It's just a matter of knowing which plants apply to which particular symptoms and things like that. And I don't claim to be entirely knowledgeable about it, but I do claim to know a little bit now and then, and I'm always happy to learn more. But is there any place that you would want to point people to besides the one website that you had mentioned, or mention that again if you like?
Reversing Vaccine Induced INDUCED diseases.com. Be sure to click on the pet page. There's an outrageous article on there, Science of Vaccine Damage, with 19 references from non-pharma funded veterinarians who came to the same conclusion that I came to many years ago, that vaccines cause pretty much every disease in internal medicine, not just in people but also in pets. And the people I deal with are so ill, it's not like you take one magic herb and you're going to be all better. Detoxification is key. I use homeopathy to do that. You also have to take things to repair the damage. But let's not forget to mention how important it is to eat organic food to avoid Monsanto's GMO food which is almost as bad as vaccines. To drink clean water is critical. You know, you can buy a 12-pack of soda at the store for $1.50. It's just amazing how they're trying to push all these things on people. So you have to do some work and learn what you need to do to stay healthy. And I agree with you that pretty much everything is reversible. Unless you've got, metastatic cancer that spreads throughout your entire body. That's probably going to be tough. But other than that, I've never had anyone that didn't get better as long as they're willing to do what they have to do. And of course, the younger they are, the more dramatic the response is. So that's the good news. And also people just realize what happens to the whistleblowers. Keep your eyes out. I'm very happy that Roger's going to be bringing me on this station. Hopefully within the next couple weeks, I'll get my time slot because I have lots more to say.
Right, I'm going to be partially responsible for doing that, and you're already a priority. But I guarantee you, I'm gonna make sure that happens as soon as I can make it happen, for my part too. And yes, you will be able to hear Dr. Carly on. Do you have a name picked out for your show yet?
I was thinking about what's ailing the world, because of course the whole world is being affected by all these things. When I talked to Roger, it seemed like he kind of wanted me to concentrate on vaccines, but there's so many other things to talk about. So, that's what I'm thinking, what's ailing the world.
Well, right. I mean, and that's the thing. We do need to take this all into consideration, because the entire world systemically, as a whole, as a creature, if the world were a single person, there would be no system in it, I think, that has not been corrupted in some way or other at this point in time. So the holistic approach to healing the world would definitely be a valuable approach. And everybody does have their areas of focus. And vaccines are a big issue, but as we noted several times during the show, even before you were on, there is reason to understand that this is not a one-sided problem. This is definitely a multi-dimensional issue, and it needs to be addressed as such. So I look really forward to hearing all this, and you will be able to hear on tlbtowncrier.com coming up sometime in the next probably 2 weeks or so. Depending on technical issues and things like that. But we will figure that out, and I hope that I'll also be able to get you back on my show at some point, because there was a lot of specific areas I wanted to concentrate on, but I wanted to give people like an overview that listen to me about who you were and what it is your thoughts are and why. And I think we kind of did that. So thank you again for coming on tonight. It looks like I've only got about a minute or so left here. And, I appreciate everybody who's tuned in to UCY.TV radio. This is the Ochelli Effect. I am Chuck Ochelli. My guests tonight were both Roger Landry in the first hour, and in the second hour, Dr. Rebecca Carly. And we have talked about vaccines and pretty much the very, very sick world around us that doesn't have to remain that way. I believe if we get back to doing the right things and putting the right things into our systems and avoiding the poisons, we may just stand a chance at having a healthy species altogether. So, thank you again, Dr. Carly. I really appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Always check out the big picture, folks, and keep up the good work.
Absolutely. So, for everybody, I think after me tonight, you know what? I forget who comes on after me tonight. That's okay. Something good will come on UCY. I guarantee it. And I really do appreciate everybody who tuned in, whether it be on the TuneIn app or if you went to ucy.tv/TOE and checked it out there. Also, there's a chat room there. I do like to mention that. I'm not sure if the Shoutcast thing is working, but I do know the iTunes Internet Radio is still working. And the website is working. And that is that for tonight, Tuesday. Everybody be well, stay alert, and the froggy's still boiling. Bye.
At the age of 19 in 1962, she was
but I have the files. You know, I read this stuff at the National Archives, and I read these other things. I said to myself, how can that be possible? The brain, you know, pistols and fondle slab of choice. I don't know that the internet, professional records, and not just Ventura style. It doesn't matter where the information comes from as long as it's real. It's hard to get real information because seriousness